What is a single price company? Well, the Corte Inglés, for instance. You do not go to the Corte Inglés to haggle. How much is the television set? 1,000. How about 800? No. 900? No. Either you pay 1,000 or you can forget it. Well, someone might say, Professor, I don't see the entrepreneurial process working there. Well, it is working, and in exactly the same way as I have explained here. We just don't see it. Single price companies, department stores, have a highly sophisticated sales department, as does Zara, for example. It is computerized, so managers know for certain what has been sold each day. And if the stock is growing and little is selling, a mysterious hand will immediately change everything during the night for the next day, and vice versa. If the stock is dwindling, managers will either order more or raise the price. They work by trial and error in a constant attempt to find out the subjective valuations of the marginal pairs. Ultimately, the marginal pairs determine the price. Why has this institutional system of determining the price prevailed? Because it saves a lot of time and the considerable costs that would be involved if we had to negotiate by haggling case by case every time we bought something. The important thing to realize is that ultimately the price arises from the subjective valuations of the human beings who participate, specifically the marginal pairs, and that those subjective valuations arise from marginal utility. Thus, Böhm-Bawerk defines the price in the following way. He says the price is the result in the market of the reciprocal impact of subjective valuations of goods and of media of exchange, the reflection of our subjective valuations, which we place on goods through the law of marginal utility, and on money. The reflection of those subjective valuations in the market is the market price. The price emerges through the processes we have analyzed, according to their different types. Also, remember, the only subjective valuations which are relevant are those of the marginal pairs. The valuations of the excluded pairs are completely irrelevant, as are those of the included pairs with a greater capacity to buy or sell. I could be a multimillionaire willing to pay 10,000 euros for a loaf of bread, but in the end, I would pay the same as you for a loaf of bread. This is because the only valuations that affect the market, are relevant and determine the price, are those of the marginal pairs, the last people to buy and sell, those who do so with the least interest. And this is wonderful, dear students, because not only does it spare us a lot of effort, but also, and above all, in two-sided competition, it protects people who lack negotiating skills. As you will remember, in an isolated exchange, there is a wide range within which the price can be set, and the direction in which the price moves depends on the entrepreneurial alertness of each party. Well, I could be a complete idiot, or a child with no experience, and the market would still protect me, because in the end, I would pay the same price as everybody else, more or less, and it would be set by those with the least interest in closing a deal. If I had an intense interest in buying, and the two-sided competition process did not exist, I would end up paying a lot, unless I hid my interest. Like, do you remember our example, the man who falls in love with the house? Well, if I had a strong interest in selling, I would end up selling for very little, like the inconsolable widow being threatened by the bank with foreclosure. Nevertheless, thanks to the market process of two-sided competition, both sides are protected by the process itself, and no one needs to have any special negotiating skills. There is no need to haggle, and in the end, everyone pays the same price, which is determined by the subjective valuations of the marginal pairs, the only valuations relevant to our examples. Here is another interesting point. Though I chose to explain isolated exchanges first, and then auctions, and then one-sided competition among sellers, and finally two-sided competition, the most general case is that of two-sided competition, where there are various buyers and sellers. The other three cases, the first three, are particular cases within the general one, though I began in reverse order, because it is much more illustrative from a teaching standpoint. If the market is large, if instead of 10 potential buyers and 8 potential sellers, as we imagined, there are 180 1,800, 10,800, 100,000 and 80,000, 1,800,000, and so on, the larger the market is, the narrower the range determined by the subjective valuations of the marginal pairs, because the overlaps tend to approach each other, and so the price tends to be set at a point rather than within a range. Now remember that the market is always discrete. There is never an infinite number. And let us not be deceived by the illusion that prices are determined by curves which seem to intersect at a point, and that the price is always a point. No, prices always fluctuate within a range, which can be broader or narrower. All I am saying is that the broader the market is, in other words, the more potential buyers and sellers there are, the narrower the range will be. But even in markets where there are many, thousands and thousands of buyers and sellers, for example, the stock market, the price is not set at a fixed point. It fluctuates almost every minute. We cannot say, today's closing price for Santander stock was 15 euros per share. No, it was between 14.80 and 15.10. It's just that the broader or larger the market is, the narrower the price range tends to be. In our example, we supposed each person wanted to buy a horse, or each horse owner wanted to sell a horse. But in real life, many times it happens that one person has several units of a good, and therefore he may simultaneously occupy several of the places we explained in the table the day before yesterday. So, perhaps to be more accurate, instead of referring to the last or the marginal pairs in terms of people, we should refer to the marginal pairs in terms of units. The last unit bought, the first unit excluded, regardless of the people behind it, because the same person may occupy various places if he has several units available. Okay. Also, remember the law of marginal utility in accordance with the division of labor, the poorly named law of the division of labor. In a modern economy, we tend to specialize, and each of us produces so many of those goods we specialize in producing that, in accordance with the law of marginal utility, the subjective valuation we place on our good as sellers is zero. In all the cases in which this happens, and there are many, the side of the seller becomes irrelevant, and as long as the good is scarce in relative terms, that is, that in general demand exceeds supply, it is the marginal buyer, the last person to buy, who determines the market price. Granted, it is a simplification to say that the marginal pairs are reduced to nothing more than the marginal buyer if the seller values her goods at zero, because, by the law of marginal utility, since she is specialized in a specific process, she does not value at all what she produces. The shirt maker has so many shirts, thousands, that she does not value them at all. So, who determines the price? Well, the marginal buyer. Because though the shirt maker has thousands of shirts, there are hundreds of thousands of people who would pay for a shirt. There are not enough shirts. There is a market price, and it is set by the marginal, the last buyer. Notice the distaste with which I, as a buyer, might think, should I buy this shirt or not? Meh, yes, no, and then reluctantly, oh, all right, I'll buy it, but only because I've got nothing better to do. It's not that I like shopping. I'll take it. On top of that, I hesitate to hand over the money. Well, I, the marginal buyer, always set the price for everything. And who exactly is the marginal buyer? We do not know. You have probably been marginal buyers many times, and without knowing it, you have set the price for everyone. We do not know when we are marginal buyers. What we do know in theoretical terms is that the person who turns out to be the marginal buyer is the one who, without knowing it, determines the price for everyone. He tends to determine the price for everyone in this dynamic process.